Welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I am your host, Joseph Bruen. Another special guest this week. Very excited to have the Kingpin himself, Mr. Brian Milonas. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joe. It's funny, we were talking a little bit before we went live, but man, I don't even know how long I've known you now, but it feels like forever. So I'm glad we get to do this.
Absolutely, man. Yeah, it's been a long time for sure. I can't even pinpoint, when we first met, but it's been years and years, that's for sure.
I think that's the case when you're around wrestling so long. I think it's very rare instances where you can pinpoint the exact moment. You run into so. I mean, you've been around for a long time now. I mean, think of how many thousands of people you've probably crossed paths with in the wrestling business. It's wild how big it is and how small it is all at the same time.
Absolutely. And all the different facets, whether it's promoting or, I used to ring announce, so I obviously bump into a lot of people that way. And yeah, it's crazy how fast time goes by as well.
Yeah. As I sit here looking at the 44-year-old beardless version of myself, I'm like, man, I looked a heck of a lot cooler when I, in my younger days.
Yeah. Well, I wish I started this podcast when I had a brown beard, but that's okay,
Yeah, you know what? With age comes wisdom.
Exactly. Let's hope so anyway, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So let's go to the way beginning. Let's rewind back. When did you first discover pro wrestling as a fan growing up, and who were some of your favorites?
Yeah, I mean, I was a kid of the '80s for sure. I was born in 1981, so I think you can do the math, and that puts me right in the heart of Hulkamania, the WWE, explosion. It really was my aunt who got me into it. She still is a super fan. Today, like, she'll come over and we'll always watch the I was going to call them pay-per-views, but that's probably dating myself now. The PLEs, so to speak. We go to wrestling together, but she's the one that really got me into it when I was little. I remember, this might have even been like pre-kindergarten, watching the old house shows on Nessun. They used to put on, and I just remember her. My uncle too. He loved the Duke of Dorchester, Pete Doherty. So that's, going all the way back there. So I really was a child of the '80s, the LJN figures, the whole, the whole shebang. Right in that era that I think a lot of guys, my age can probably pinpoint as and still reference, Hulk Hogan, the Macho Man, Roddy Piper, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. The good old days.
It was so big back then. It's continued to grow and become larger from different points of view and, in a different aspect. But it was so large back then culturally that even if you weren't a wrestling fan, you knew Hulk Hogan, you knew Macho Man, you knew Ric Flair. There were certain names that you knew, and it was a phenomenon for sure in the '80s.
Oh yeah, it was. People who didn't grow up then, you don't. And it's what I like doing is going back and watching those old stuff. I don't know if the matches always hold up. I mean, some of them do, but some of them don't. But to look at the reactions in the crowd, in the crowd, the demographics of the crowd too are so different now than they were then. You saw, like in my mind, you think of the little old ladies that used to be in the crowd, and and just everybody, right? Everybody got with the good guys and hated the bad guys. It was just such a different, time in wrestling where the crowd demographics were slightly different. People reacted, I think, very differently. Like they didn't get, boy, I'm going to sound like an old guy here for a second, but the heat used to go on the heels and not the writing team back then.
And there have been different, obviously eras, but even before our time, wrestling fans would attend the wrestling shows dressed up. They'd be in, like
Mhm.
tuxedos watching these things, and
Yeah.
they'd have their hats, and it was presented in such a way that it was a special event, and that's what it was going to be.
Yeah, or the way they just did the business was such a different beast. I mean, even you think of the '80s being actually a transcendent of how we got here today, but I mean, even then they were still doing monthly shows at the Boston Garden, maybe monthly or weekly at MSG, and they do just do that. They would just do that Northeast loop still on a regular basis. Where now, I mean, I think we're fortunate up here in the New England area where WWE still seems to come probably a little bit more, just disproportionately more than other regions. But it just, yeah, just fundamentally a different business at that point.
And it's, if you're in the middle of Iowa, you really have just one or two arenas, where here we're lucky. We've got Boston and Worcester and Providence, and they're all very close, so you can get to them all.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, was there a certain point where you decided, this is something I'd like to do, maybe give it a shot?
Yeah, I think as growing up as a kid, you always like dream of doing it, right? And but you don't really know how to. Like I didn't know wrestling school was a thing growing up. I just knew I loved wrestling, and that'd be so cool to do. And it really wasn't until a friend of mine went to Killer Kowalski school where I was like, "Whoa, wait, we have like a." And of course, I knew Killer Kowalski, and you kind of hear the legend of, he trained people, and but I didn't realize you could just go to his school. Like you could just do it. You just walk in and pay tuition, and and my friend did. So I was in high school. So I would say the first time I was really like, wow, I could actually take a stab at this was I was a teenager, and I started going to um I'd go and sit, here I am 15 years old, and I'd go and sit and watch the classes at Kowalski's and talk to Walter and just be so scared because of here's this larger than life person who's just sitting 2 feet away from me, and then just going to the different indie shows, meeting. It's funny, like there's so many guys in the business now that I know from even before I got into it, and I got into it pretty young. I got into it at 19, but there's a handful of guys that I've known since I was 14, 15, 16 years old.
Yeah. Yeah, when it comes to Walter Killer Kowalski, obviously fond memories, and I used to be his ring announcer for Kowalski All Star Wrestling for a short period of time, it was maybe a year and a half, 2 years, and at that point he was doing spot shows, and but it was a pleasure, just to kind of talk to him backstage and pick his brain a little bit, and he
Mhm.
was always such a kind of a prankster or a jokester, and you wouldn't expect that from Walter, knowing his persona, but then seeing him backstage kind of making bathroom humor and different things
Oh,
like
he
that.
loved fart jokes. Like he absolutely loved a good fart joke, a good pull my finger
Yeah.
type of thing.
So yeah, Walter Killer Kowalski, a great memory of his for me was interviewing him. He was one of my first long form interviews. It was probably about 40 minutes. I remember walking up those stairs, sitting on the couch with him, and I was 17 years old. I was in the business for only about a year at that point. I was nervous, but I was excited. And, I had all these questions written out and I was ready to go. And I remember the way he presented it to me was, oh, just ask me one of those questions and I'll take it from there. I'll cover it all for you. And I was like, oh, okay. So, it kind of took the nerves away a little bit. And so I asked him the initial question or maybe two questions. And he went on for, probably a half hour or close to it. And then out of nowhere, he just says, all right, so what kind of questions you got for me today? And I was mortified because I'm like, all right, wait a minute. What has he already answered? I was just I was
Yeah.
so nervous. And, but it's a great memory and something fun to look back on for sure.
Those stairs, man, like that's the story, I think. And I actually never, I was, I never trained there. So I'd been to that building, if I had to guess, 20, 30 times just going with my buddy, he started training at 16. Um, but I never actually trained there. But yeah, the stairs were the little door, and then you think of the greats, I mean, the guy that right now sort of shapes the industry walked up those steps and trained there.
Yeah, seriously. So, if you want to walk us through your training process and how you did get trained, who trained you fully, and that whole process there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the intent was to go to Kowalski's for sure. My buddy had gotten out of it for a little bit and was looking to get back in, and that was around the time of like the when Mike Hollow left. Mike Hollow was the head trainer at Kowalski's for I think a few years, and he went over and started. That's their story. I won't get into too many details there because everything is hearsay. But um, I think it was a little bit contentious, and but Mike went over and to Chaotic Wrestling, and they started the Chaotic Training Center in North Andover, Mass. And I remember going to like sort of like the kickoff meeting um, to the CTC, and boy, my eyeballs about bugged out of my head when it was right. It was in this was 2001, and it was not too long after the Tough Enough finale, and in the room is Chris Nowinski, and I was like, "Oh, all right, all right." So I went and I watched classes for a couple months because I didn't have the money, and then, a friend of mine at the time, his mom lent me the money to sign up, and I was north of 500 pounds and completely out of shape, and thought I was going to be this great wrestling star. And boy, did my world get rocked in the very first training session. I paid in full. Paid in full at the time. I think it was like $1,500. They were running like a deal because the school just opened. I think I'm within the first, probably within like the first like 10 students, I would think at the CTC. I don't know that for any certainty, but I just think of the um, when I say that, I mean like the people they trained from the ground up. Of course, there were guys that like Mike had trained, like Aaron Stevens was there, um, John Walters, Vince Vicalo, Arch Kincaid. So those type of guys were there, but I was definitely among the probably the first 10 signed up. But I got in the ring with my other trainer, Duke Dalton, and man, I think I tried to take a few bumps, and I got so dizzy, I went and hid in the bathroom and literally had a panic attack, sitting there being like, "Oh, this is not for me. I need my money back."
Yeah.
But I was able to compose myself, and um, the first year or so was a little rocky, a little rough. I had to eat some humble pie. I think that was the first time in my life as an adult I was really truly held accountable. I'll always credit Mike and Dukes, but especially Mike for um, really teaching me hard lessons that I needed as an adult. Um, I'd go as far to say is not only do I not have the wrestling success that I had, or I've had, but I wouldn't probably have the success I've had in my real life without Mike. Um, Mike is a very important figure in my life, and somebody who still to this day just eternally grateful for that tough love and that holding me accountable, and not I'm not accepting excuses um, type of mentality, because I definitely didn't have that in me when I first started.
And we just had Mike Hollow on a couple episodes ago. It hasn't aired yet, but he did mention that not only does he teach currently the wrestling side of things, but he teaches you how to succeed in life and give you pointers, outside of the ring too. So he's still continuing to do that to this day.
Yeah, and he's working with WWE with the WWE ID program, and which I know from Mike, having that relationship has always been a lifelong dream. So I'm real happy for him that he gets to kind of shape that, because I mean, he is when you think of the guys that he's trained and put in spots. I mean, Aaron Stevens, we mentioned John Walters, Kofi Kingston. He is just Josh Briggs, who's there now. You got Handsome Johnny, Ivar, Tommaso Ciampa, myself. Um, just trained a lot, a lot of damn good wrestlers. Some that made it to the biggest stage, and some that didn't. But I'll tell you what, somebody that Mike Hollow trained just by their basics, their work, their footwork, their attention to detail, their attention to the small things. Um, to me, there's no reason. Mike is doing his thing up in Concord for Elite. with the WWE ID program. But man, I think Mike could, he could be working down in, Orlando with, with their. I think of Mike, the perfect situation for Mike would be working with all those NIL athletes that they bring in down there and just teaching them the basics of the business, because there's not a better trainer that I've ever encountered for the basics and the foundation of this business. He instilled in us that um, you could have a beautiful house, but if it doesn't have a foundation, it's gonna eventually collapse. And he is, the best at building that foundation to build everything else upon. I wouldn't. Every one of us, would not have gotten where we have gotten. And then on the flip side too, he's impacted me as a trainer and the way I train and the things I emphasize. Those are the things I emphasize because I understand the importance of, when all else fails, if your basics, um, you know, if your foundation is good, you're never going to be lost. You're never going to, you're always going to stand out in a good way. It's what you build on top of that counts too. But you know, for all the reasons I didn't, get to WWE or whatever, it was never my work. It was never my footwork. It was never my basics. It was those were. Hopefully someday I'll be like an 80-year-old guy, but I think my wrestling footwork would still be pretty solid at 80 because of Mike.
Right, exactly. And during your time there as a trainee, as you mentioned, there were already some people there like Luis Ortiz and Vicalo, and they were already training with Mike. But the other 10 students that were basically ground up, training with you, did any of those students go on to become, anything on the independent scene? Or they all kind of fade out? Who else was there in that class?
Yeah, I mean, the early days, not really, like the real early days, but as you start to get like, excuse me, 6 months to a year in, that's when Ivar shows up. That's when Tommaso shows up. That's when Chase Del Monte shows up. The Logan brothers, Max Bauer. Um, these guys all start coming in at that point, and that's when when I think of um, my days at the CTC and the peak at the CTC is those were the classes, and at that point, I'm pretty sure Aaron was already gone. Aaron was gone by that point because he got signed pretty quickly after I went to the CTC. Like he was off to OVW, but John Walters was still there every week. Vicalo was there every training class. Arch Kincaid was there every training class. Like, I mean, as you can imagine, though, I'm listing those names off, and it's like those are some maybe not some of your listeners might not even know who the heck some of these guys are, but every guy I just mentioned there is damn good worker. And boy, the training classes were intense. Like you had to show up and you had to be ready to go hard, because we worked hard, man. We worked incredibly hard in class. And my back and body still feels it today. Maybe probably took a few too many bumps in training class, but it is what it is. But they were fun. It was, man, was it fun just getting in the ring and training. I think that's what, when you think of that group of guys and how good that all of us ended up. I think it's really just, not only is it Mike, but it's all of us pushing each other too. It's all of us pushing each other to get better. It's the every Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday being there, pushing each other, realizing like a place like WWE only has so many spots and there's a lot of us, and we all want to get there. So, pushing each other, but at the same time, every one of us wanted those spots. So it was a fun time.
And looking at one of your early matches, 2003 Chaotic Wrestling, you would work with Billy Kryptonite. Of
Yeah.
course, Chad Wicks. Any memories of working with Billy?
Um, you know, um, he's an interesting character. I don't think he was the best wrestler by any stretch of the imagination, but that was my first chaotic match. I actually, it's funny, I'd worked so long and I had lost enough weight and I really worked hard to put myself in a position of, um, getting on a chaotic show, and I get up on the second rope and I'm so excited. When I go down, I stomp on the, um, I stomp on the ground, and I tore my meniscus in my right knee. Had an absolutely dreadful match. One of the owners of Chaotic Wrestling at the time said he'll never be in a ring again for us. And but Billy Kryptonite himself, he is. I still remember. I'll give you a fun Billy Kryptonite story. Chad Dick in WWE. If people remember the Dicks, but he was winning the Chaotic title. It was weird. It was a weird Chaotic show at some like hotel in Tewksbury, Mass. Like a really nice, like a room like people would get married in, I'm sure, or have their wedding reception in. And he was winning the title, and he cornered me in the locker room and made me say like positive affirmations with him for about 45 minutes. And it was one of the strangest experience to this day of my entire professional wrestling
Really?
career.
Wow.
Yeah, Chad was, I mean, if you've read the stories online of his time in WWE and OVW, and Chad is an interesting character, man. Nothing bad to say about him. He's never I mean, he tried to be helpful in his way, but
Yeah.
Billy Kryptonite was an interesting cat.
Yeah. Another one you have already mentioned, you've gone on to work with many times over the years. Handsome Johnny, of course, IVR in WWE. But early on, 2003, that same year, Chaotic Wrestling, your first time working with him. What are your memories working with Johnny over the years, or Todd?
Yeah, I just think it was our easy chemistry. It was always easy working together, and we were pretty fast friends too. To this day, still one of my best friends. We talk all the time, and um, but just the easy chemistry we had. We had easy chemistry outside of the ring too, so I think that translates. Just easy to work with, and just he was always so smart. He was always, just tremendous athleticism for his size. But I mean, that's almost like a backhanded compliment when you hear people talk about like, oh, they're good for their size. Like, Todd was just good, man. And he still is. It sucks. I think injuries have zapped a little bit. From him, but I think of his run of when Ray Rowe was hurt recently, and he had that nice singles run on Raw, and people just opened their eyes of like, holy hell, this guy is amazing. This guy is so damn good. And I think, had he not had the luck that he's had with injuries, as far as like how many he's had and the severity of them, there's no reason he couldn't have been a main event guy in WWE. He just knows how to connect with a crowd. He knows and understands how to build drama and put matches together. He knows how to use his athleticism. Um, uh, you know, I'm so happy that he finally got where he belonged among the best wrestlers in the world. Um, but yeah, right from the beginning, we always just had a easy chemistry. I do think back to it. We're funny. We're in our early 20s, and we're booked against each other in Methuen, Mass, at the historic Knights of Columbus. I think it was like the Gaythorn or something like that, right on Route 28. And we go out there and we're going to show people that, hey, we're not just two big guys. We can wrestle too. So we go out there and we start the match, and I think we might have had, at that point, we probably were lucky to have 8 to 10. And we spend the first half of the match like chain wrestling and standoff. And we get to the back, and Duke Dalton, one of our trainers, goes, "What the hell was that?" And we were like, by the way, our chests were like, we're King Kong and Godzilla at this point. We just showed everybody that two big guys can go out there and wrestle. And he's like, and we're like, what do you mean? Like, that was it not good? And he's like, well, it was good, like fundamentally, but he's like, who the hell wants to see two guys your size chain wrestling? He's like, you can sprinkle some stuff in, but you just gave a match that nobody wanted to see. And the match, I'm sure the crowd was silent for it because they're just like, what are these guys doing? But it was funny. It was really funny. We basically went out there and we did like a class drill, and we thought we were, having WrestleMania, and,
Yeah.
and just like the get that slice of humble pie when we walked through the curtain was funny.
Right. Now, EWA, another promotion you'd bounce back and forth to over the years. Any personal memories from EWA, your time there?
I mean, I think my biggest memory from EWA comes before I even got in the business. If you go back and if you remember a documentary called oh, what the hell was it? MTV True Life. I Want to Be a Pro Wrestler.
Yeah.
You'll actually see a 15-ish-year-old Brian Milonas creeping around the EWA in the because I used to go to a lot of EWA shows with my buddy. He worked up there for Tony Atlas, and in the show that famously gets canceled um, because the promoter just kind of screwed over Tony. Um, I'm in that episode, like, or I'm in those scenes, just creeping in the background as like a kid. But um, I think the EWA version I worked for was Dr. Hersey ran it, and I had some great matches. Again, I worked everywhere I went. I think I could wrestle another 100 years, and I don't think I'll ever wrestle anybody as much between class and shows as I wrestled Handsome Johnny.
Right.
I've wrestled every incarnation of him. I think I've wrestled except for Ivar. I've never wrestled Ivar, so. I guess there's one incarnation of the handsome one that I've never wrestled, but um, I think I had like a feud that ended up in like a dog collar match or
Oh
something with
wow.
him when he was the Duke of Elegance, Don Chesterfield.
Yeah.
But we used to wrestle out in Orange, Mass. I thought those were fun crowds. The place was always packed, and a lot of fun times out there. And again, I think I probably wrestled handsome, you know, just about every show.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, and then fast forward maybe a year, about 2004, Broadway Ken Phoenix you'd work with. Any memories with Ken?
Yeah, I remember, I mean, just being impressed with Ken, and he was such a, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say he was such a good kid. I mean, he probably could still be wrestling. I don't even know that he's 40 yet. If
Right.
he is 40, he's just touching 40. But he was really good and really young, and I think it was obvious. He was a guy who he might have been about the first guy. Where it was pretty obvious to me, like, this guy's gonna get a shot at some point in WWE. And I mean, I just still to this day can just somebody who I feel like we didn't spend a tremendous amount of time together, some time around each other, but I feel like we were always more ships passing in the night, and I mean, just still couldn't be a nicer guy. And I'm glad he's got a job with WWE. I know he had some rocky times with them, but glad to see him still making a positive impact on the business. And again, I think he was about the first guy where I saw that I was like, oh man, this guy he's different. He's definitely going to, um, end up somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the Logan brothers, I mean, they were brothers, but a lot of people thought they were twins, and they weren't. But I feel like they had that twin synergy thing going on because they were just so smooth in the ring. To me, to this day, they're still the guys that I'm still the most shocked that never exploded onto the national scene because like, I think, man, they would have fit so well into those early Ring of Honor days. I think they could have gone to WWE and um you know, been great there. They were just so talented, so easy to work with. They knew what they were doing. They knew how to place their stuff. And then I think I had a singles feud with Brian and Chaotic that was just Brian. Brian and Matt both excellent, but Brian really came through in that kind of main event spot. And we had some man. I still remember one time wrestling him, and he really wanted to get color, which um, I have strong opinions of when it comes to like doing it on the indies and stuff. And but he really wanted to do it, and I said, all right, man, all right, you do you. Like, it's if you want to bleed, as long as I don't have to bleed, I'm cool. Um, and he just hit like this gusher. And I mean, when I, the old proverbial crimson mask, and he just really had the crimson mask. And then, fast forward, we all worked together for the owner of Chaotic Wrestling, Jamie. His family owned a business, and they had a warehouse, and all of us worked in the warehouse together. So we're wrestling, by the way, we're all wrestling like at night together on weekends, and then working together all day. but Brian put the background image of him with the bloody face on one of the computers at work. And years later, after he no longer worked there, that picture was still there. Nobody could get it off. So it's just bloody Brian Logan. But I mean, I still remember going to TVs. Like I would do a lot of extra work for WWE during that time, and people would ask you oh, hey, where do you train out of? And if you said the Chaotic Wrestling, inevitably the next question was, oh, the Logans. How are the Logans? So it still blows my mind that they never got jobs. They might be among the best guys that I've ever wrestled that never had a job, like in some form, for a TV company.
Yeah. And it's too bad because I feel like that kind of happened with a lot of talents, and more so in that era, the early 2000s, mid
Yeah.
2000s. You're looking at a lot of bigger guys like Heidenreich and Luther Reigns, and they didn't have as many of the Daniel Bryans and AJ Styles on television per se. So, and then of course once they
WWE's hiring
transitioned,
practices stunk then, by the way. They
yeah,
stunk then. They were so obsessed. It was second generation, and six. I mean, their whole thing was like 6'4", 240, chiseled, clean shaven, no tattoos, chiseled. Like they just wanted a certain look, and they wanted everybody to have the same exact look. So I mean, there's so many guys. I mean, you even think of guys that eventually got there, like like Danielson and Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, and they could have had all these guys. AJ Styles, they could have had all these guys in their early 20s, and they were all good enough to be there. They just didn't fit the cookie cutter WWE mold, and they were so obsessed with as much as I feel like I learned from guys like Tom Pritchard doing his camps and stuff. We had no shot at them. I feel like a lot of us, because he had an edict he had to follow. They knew exactly what they wanted, and I think that's more the John Laurinaitis era of talent relations, when that it's like, oh, everybody's just got to look the same, and they would just. I feel like Raw and SmackDown were like these army of guys that they look like they're the creator wrestler from the video game, and they're all so there's probably 150 guys that all looked exactly the same that debuted on WWE TV at some point that nobody remembers because there was absolutely nothing memorable about them. They talk about Brock Lesnar and Shelton Benjamin and John Cena and Randy Orton from that OVW class, but for every one of them, there was probably 20 guys that debuted on TV that if you had to bet your life savings on it, you wouldn't be able to come up with a name.
yeah. And one of the true characters of the New England scene passed away not too long ago, unfortunately. But any memories of working, even if it was just on a show with Robbie Ellis, the Sports Illustrated legend?
I was on a lot of shows with Robbie Ellis. As a matter of fact, I was in a faction in EWA with Robbie Ellis. I was Brian Roselli, and I was Johnny Heartbreakers, Romeo Roselli's little brother, quotation marks, little brother. And Robbie Ellis was our grandfather in that faction. So yeah, Robbie was always. I mean, he was a character. He really felt like a cartoon character, and at that age, in your 20s, you're around this dude who's in his 60s wrestling, and you're like, what is this dude doing? Like, but he was a character, and he was funny, and yeah, I did see he passed away, and it brought back some good memories to him. He was always a nice guy, always very very nice, willing to help people. um you know, Robbie was just, I wouldn't say we ran in the same circles or whatever, but he was always just, very easy to talk to, very easy in the locker room to be around, just a nice guy. And, good, when I did see that he unfortunately had passed, nothing but good memories there for sure.
And for fans that aren't familiar with you, if you could kind of run down and maybe they're seeing you for the first time here, run down the evolution of your gimmicks, where it started, the different names you've had
Yeah.
over time, and and that way, they can start to look up your matches and check you out.
Yeah, I mean the first name I ever had in wrestling was terrible. It was a rib because of my weight and stuff. It was Brian Buffet, and um, at that time, yeah, Chaotic had there was some people who were a little mean spirited and chaotic at the time, and Brian Buffet was just a horrendous name that you know I, it is what it is. I was just starting out. You know, at least it wasn't Tommy penmanship, I guess. But then I think as I started to branch out into different places, people just saw me as different things, and I didn't have a defined identity. And you're also talking. I mean, I'm gonna date myself for real, but my career predates internet type stuff. Like when I started, like it was still tapes or DVD. I don't even know if when I first started it was like sending DVDs places. I think it might have still been tapes at that point, and it was just everybody had a little bit different vision. So I remember I went and worked for Ali Muhammad, who was a local indie guy. Him and Gino, actually, Gino Martino, and I failed to mention them when I was talking about my training, but Mike Hollow was responsible for my foundation building, but the understanding how to work like a big man, understanding my size, how to use that effectively, how to make sure people didn't take advantage of me, because everybody wants to pick up the big guy and look strong. So sometimes you got to have those like, no, I'm not letting you do that. Like that, this is what makes me special.
Right.
So it was Gino Martino and Ali Muhammad were the guys who really taught me to work like a big guy, really taught me how to use my size, really uh, instilled that in me. And I'm forever grateful. Unfortunately, Ali's not Anthony Rufo, Ali Muhammad, not here with us anymore. But I went and worked for his promotion, and then he wanted to call me Tank Sherman, and then he changed it to Brian the Sherman Tank Abbott, and that was because I had a goatee at the time, like a long anvil goatee, and he thought I looked like Tank Abbott, and that happened. So I don't even know if you could find some of those matches. I had a lot of matches at his promotion. Brian Roselli for the I was a man. I mean, I already kind of in a contradict. Like I have a very Greek last name. I clearly do not look Greek. Maybe the nose and the bubble butt make me look Greek, but certainly not my skin tone. I'm as pasty white as they come. But I'm a pale white Greek kid playing an Italian. So that was funny. Brian Roselli. I'm sure I'm missing some along the way here. In Ring of Honor, they called me Brawler for a stretch, which I absolutely detested. But I'm not going to tell my bosses at Ring of Honor, no, that stinks. Well, really, it was one guy, but yeah, those are some of the names. But really, I remember going through the process. We were just trying to come up with a name for me, and I mean, I think one of them, literally, one of the ideas, it started off as a joke, and then they actually liked it, was Zakem, like the Zakem Bridge in
Oh, wow.
Boston, and I was
Yeah.
like, that's horrible. I'm not doing that. So finally we just decided on my real name. Like it's unique, and um, you know, um, I don't know. I think guys sometimes make too big of a deal of, especially this day and age, oh, I can't know my real name or whatever. It's like, I don't know, it takes like 30 seconds. Even back in the day, I was able to look up wrestlers' real names and stuff.
Yeah.
So it happened to work. It worked, and then um, the Kingpin piece, we just felt like I needed something, and I wasn't a big comic book guy. I'm a comic book movie guy, but I was never a comic book guy. I don't know the lore of stuff. I don't know all the villains, and it was Jamie Jamakowski, who the owner of Chaotic, who um he's a big comic book guy, and thought of the Kingpin, and he's like, that'd be and I just thought it sounded cool. I was like, oh, Kingpin Brian Milonas, that sounds really cool. Let's roll with it. And then from there it's just evolving and finding what that's going to be for me,
Yeah.
so that really was the process. But yeah, I didn't have like a good, I didn't do the old NXT thing where you list, you come up with first names and last names,
Right.
and really just settled on my real name. And I'm glad I did. It's a I think if somebody does want to search me and things like that, like it's I think there's like one other Brian Milonas. Then he was like during my career, I think he was like a high school kid or something.
Mhm. So looking at your character a little bit more, the tights that you had, where would you purchase your tights from regularly? What was some of the inspiration behind some of the looks that you've had over the years? And maybe entrance music too, if you want to talk about that, what you used throughout the years.
Yeah, I mean, I think the look, for the gear was I was very, especially as I lost weight, I was very self-conscious about like my midsection and my thighs and the loose skin and stuff, and I just didn't want to expose those, and I didn't want anything tight on them. So I like the more loose pant look. I remember, back in the day, we all used to go to Easy Money. Um, you know, so that was, give him money and then wait 18 months to get your gear. So the first real set of gear I got from him. Um, and then, over the years, like I remember, Sarat Makazi, who works for WWE now, he's made some of my gear over the years. Um, the best stuff I made, the stuff that I really loved from that I was wearing in Ring of Honor, was made by a guy named Clint Stevens, who's sports entertainment gear. I believe he works for AEW now, but he just does phenomenal work, and I loved. It's funny. I remember I was always a very um never did anything flashy when it came to gear. I just liked very like you know I liked professional looking gear. I didn't want to wear street clothes or anything like that, but I wasn't real big into like crazy designs or anything like that. I remember really did the Ring of Honor camp. Um, and it was Christopher Daniels who gave me some advice on, he's like, hey, yeah, you got to get a logo and you got to plaster it on everything, your gear, your t-shirts, he's like, your logo should be like people should be able to identify you just by the logo. So that's when I worked with I forget the guy's name now that I worked on the logo with, but he came up with a real great logo for me. And then I remember I had this. It was still very plain looking gear, but it had my logo and it looked professional. It was well made, but it just was not flashy. It was just white on black gear, like white, design work. And we were in the Hammerstein Ballroom, and Bubba Ray Dudley comes up to me and goes, "Your gear looks indie-rific." And I said, "Oh, do you have any advice?" And he goes, "Nope." And he goes, "I know I'm not the flashiest dresser when it comes to wrestling gear." He's like, "But your gear sucks." I
Wow.
was like, "All right." But you know what? I mean, you look, Bubba's Bubba. He's very direct. I think that's what people don't like about him is he's just very direct. He's not going to mince words. If he has it can come across as sharp at times, or like as demeaning, but I don't think he ever meant anything like that. I think he genuinely tried to help people. He just had a way of communicating.
I
And
think
but
so. Yeah.
the message there was very clear. You got to get better gear, and I did. I started to. That's when I started to add in like the pops of like silver, gold, like sparkly type stuff because he's right. I'm on TV. I need something that even if my character isn't that, I think the gear still has to have a certain look to it when you're on TV. So the quality of my gear was always good, but the design I really started working with some different actual designers and stuff for my gear and for my look at that point.
Hmm.
I knew I
And
didn't want to wear trunks. A lot of times people wanted to throw me in trunks, and I was like, I am not going to be the fat guy who wears trunks. That's just not. I'm not that. I mean, I'm confident, but I am not that confident.
and the flip side of that, how about on the entrance music side of things?
Yeah, so it was boy, I don't remember some of the stuff I used. I think in Chaotic I used Black and White by Static X early on, but I think that was given to me because we were in like a faction. But the one I think that people remember the most is Coming Undone by Korn. And I was a big Korn fan back in the day. Probably a lot of us were. I don't know if I could listen to that music now just because I'm old and I like my soft rock and yacht rock and
Right.
but yeah, I think that's the one that people identify with me most is Coming Undone by Korn. I love the beat of it. I love the beginning of it. It matched honestly the way I walk. Which if you saw me walking in in the mall, or down the street, I'd probably walk very similar to my character. It's just the way I'm built. I am all, I'm all ass and thighs, Joe. And, and when you have that, you just walk a certain way, but it matched the music. And then later on, when I worked with a guy up in Tyler Sheesgreen and he's from Canada. He did Lance Archer's music that he uses in AEW, and I finally decided, like, look, I'm on TV. I probably should get some custom stuff that, if I didn't end up using it in Ring of Honor just because I was in the tag team, but um, I could have. And then it also becomes your signature too. And the more, like, also too, when you think of like streaming now online and YouTube, like it was hard to have copyrighted music for a stretch there. So, but really that was like, I told the guy, like, I wanted like the soul of Coming Undone by Korn as like the beat, and he did a great job of it. And it did, and it's not like I think of the old WCW riffs on like mainstream songs. It's not like that at all. It's like just a good, really good song with a good beat. It's called There Can Only Be One. It's on all like the streaming services and Apple Music and Spotify and things like that. But the inspiration for that was still Coming Undone by Korn.
Interesting. Awesome. And another promotion you'd work for briefly was NWA New England. You appeared there 2004 specifically. You worked with Apocalypse, also known as Stiff Mike. What was it like working with Mike?
Yeah, Mike's a guy who a lot of people have very strong opinions on, but I love Mike. And it's from those eras of, he's always nice to me, always tried to help me, and I think that's probably because, I'm a big guy and he saw similarities, between us. But yeah, I remember that match specifically. I think it might have been for some sort of like weird championship or something. And it was in like this, I couldn't tell you what town it was, but I remember it was like this weird little like Knights of Columbus type thing. And the thing I remember most about Mike was he would give it to you, right? He would chop you and he would work tight. But he wasn't looking for you not to do it back. And he was a guy who I realized, and I realized with a few other guys too. I think of like Rick Fuller, and it was the same type of thing where, they're going to give it to you, but they're expecting it back. And so that was, a learning moment for me. And really, I've gotten to work Mike a lot over the years and recent years. I know he just had his last match, recently. So congratulations to him on geez, he must have wrestled for 30 years because he's one of the first guys. So when I talked about people that I met like pre getting into the business, Mike I've known since I was like 15 years old. But he's always been nice to me, always, especially early on, tried to give me advice. When I started to kind of branch out and have success, was always a guy who would um, congratulate me, reach out, kind words. And now he's doing great, man. Um, he's a pizza maker now. It's funny, he has his own like restaurant and stuff. So yeah, I like Mike. Again, I know people have strong opinions on Mike, but he's somebody I like. He's my buddy, and I'm glad we got to share the ring, and I'm glad he's still doing well in life.
Yeah, I remember Mike fondly and ring announcing him over the years, and yeah, he was always a pleasure. Never had an issue with Mike.
Yeah, he's another guy. Just like people don't like people who are outspoken,
Yeah.
sometimes, and but Mike's also a guy. Like anytime he's rubbed me the wrong way, I could just be like, hey, no,
Cut it out.
it's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah. He would give people crap or whatever, but he expected it back, and that's kind of like, I mean, man, I don't know how you are with your friends, or like I think of like me and my brother. Like if you hear us together, you would be like, man, do these guys even like each other? And I make the joke like the easiest way to tell if I like somebody is I talk crap to their face, and behind their back I say the nicest things on earth.
Exactly. And you mentioned championships. You've held many championships over the years, whether it be New England champion or heavyweight champion multiple times, tag team champions. Was there a title reign or a championship win that kind of meant the most to you, or you were most proud of?
was that probably that first chaotic title win. Just because my journey in chaotic, right? I was never, if you look at the beginning of it, I was never thought upon. I mean, they probably didn't even think I was going to even get to a show. Like they probably just thought it was a bill payer, helping keep the lights on. And then once I started to figure it out, once I lost weight, once I um, really started to take it seriously, and started to kind of build my resume of like, hey, so then I was on the shows and I was did a couple main events, on the, being a mid-card guy, and then to get the opportunity to be the chaotic champ at that point, that really was signified to me that the school and the promotion was like, they actually saw something in me, because at that point chaotic was pretty tied in with WWE, and trying to, I mean, at that point they were straight up trying to get a developmental, because there were rumors that WWE wanted to put developmentals all over the country. So for them to make me champion at that point, the mindset I was in was like, wow, I like, it felt like an accomplishment. It felt like um, the people that I wanted to impress at that point, which were, Mike Hollow, Jamie, but really, the two guys that I have to give the most credit for, and the ones who really advocated for me to be on shows and fought for me to get those chances and saw the most in me early on, were Todd Sinclair, who ended up being the senior official for Ring of Honor, and a guy, and I don't know if you know him, but Eric Arsenault, we called him Mucko. So
Yeah.
he's no longer with us, but um, boy, do I miss that guy. He was, Mucko was just such a fun and a joy and a pleasure to be around. But those were the first two guys to really see something beyond, just me being this fat wrestling student at the CTC, right? They were the first guys to see, um, anything in me, and they really fought hard for me, and I really am appreciative. I'll always be appreciative to both of them for forever, for really being my biggest advocates at those times, because and you think in the grand scheme of things, right, is, who's going to remember me being the chaotic wrestling champion, right? It's not going to go on my gravestone someday. But at the same time, it was the first time that started to get like recognition of like, wow, this guy's a good wrestler, this guy can really, there's something there. And those were the first two guys to really see it. So uh
Yeah, so Eric and Todd, early in my career, I remember them as fans. They were still,
yeah.
hecklers in the crowd, and they did a great job at pissing off those wrestlers. And you know,
Mucko was the funniest guy. Like, he was Eric Arsenault, Mucko. He was the absolute funniest like human being I think I've ever, like, been around. Like, that was my friend. Like, I think he could have been a stand-up comedian. Like, he had such, like, he was so quick-witted, and he had such comedic timing. Like, the sad part is with Eric, I just don't think he knew how special he was. I don't think he knew how much people cared about him. Um, it sucks. Again, it sucks that he's no longer with us. But man, was he a funny guy.
yeah, yeah, they reminded me of, as fans, as Statler and Waldorf from the
Yeah.
Muppets. And they'd be in the crowd, just kind of very boisterous. And I never
Yeah.
got to know Eric, but I always heard great things about Eric. Todd, he's worked for me. I've worked with him, over the years, early on, and Todd was always a pleasure. But two great guys for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the greatest moments in the early days of Ring of Honor. It's, it really, I mean, up until, and I'm not trying to criticize anybody, but I'd stop short saying that the Tony Khan era of Ring of Honor is a banner era of the promotion. So really, you think of all the eras of Ring of Honor, the majority of the big matches and stuff. Todd's the guy in there. It's Todd or Paul Turner for the most part. That
Yeah,
one of them two is in there for all those big. You think of the big matches that you see in Punk, Samoa Joe, the Briscoes, Jay Lethal, Austin Aries, all, the Hit Squad, whatever, all these, different low key, like those two guys were in the ring for all of that.
yeah,
So Todd, just a tremendous referee, and he's a guy who I think he was, I think he ended up, I think he's very happy where he ended up in his career. And Ring of Honor was his life and his passion. And, but he was absolutely a good enough referee to work for WWE. They just, again, had a very narrow view of, what a referee should look like.
Yeah. What would you say is your greatest takeaway from working with Walter Killer Kowalski, whether it be, his advice or just your time with him?
Yeah. I mean, I think the greatest piece of advice for him, and it's, I think it's stuff that it's not the most like profound, but it was just the thing he always said: shoot for the moon, you may hit a star. And that was Walter's kind of saying, you like, shoot for the biggest thing you can, but even if you don't hit that, there's other things you can accomplish along the way. And just the things that I'll take from knowing him is just I'm a guy who I love the history of the business. I love listening to the stories. And I think the way people started to treat Walter at the end was just like, he's the old guy, because he'd have his stock stories, like he'd have the Haystacks Calhoun story, or some of the different things. But if you sat there and talked to him, like you could get some real great stuff. And just because he, his idea of what constituted a great match at that point was okay. It's probably not the contemporary view of it, but that didn't mean it didn't have value. It didn't mean that he, and so just it was me. It was Ivar. It was Tommaso. The guys who really respected the history of the business, um, and really like understood, like, we have a living, breathing piece of professional wrestling history we literally have a pro wrestling textbook at our disposal. Like, I don't mean to trivialize Walter in that way, because he is one of the most important figures in pro wrestling history. Like, when you think of New England wrestling over the last 25 years and all the people that have come from here and all the um, great matches and promotions that have popped up, it's all because back in the 70s, Walter decided he was going to set up camp in Malden, Massachusetts. Like, it all starts with Walter. All of this, all the stuff that I even think of, the things that you do with the Hall of Fame and the convention, like, those things don't happen. Those opportunities aren't there for all of us without Walter. He, to me, he is a very important piece in just the history of pro wrestling, with the early days of television and the golden era. Walter's a guy who would have been a main eventer in any era, but you're talking about a guy who was a main eventer for what, 25, 30 years. Everywhere he went, he was an attraction. He was an attraction overseas in Japan. He was an attraction every promotion. I think most famously people remember him for the Bruno stuff. That's the tail end of Walter's career. That's the tail end of his like run on top. Um, he was a main event guy from the 50s on, and you think of like, think of the Killer Kowalski thing. When you look at Walter's pictures from the 50s, he was a matinee idol. Like, he was a dude, was a stud. Like, he was a good looking dude. Like, so to have him there was just like, I it was a privilege and an honor to spend as much time. I took me and Ivar took a road trip up to Quebec City with Walter. Um, I'll give you a good story. This is a good Walter story. So we're driving up to Canada. It's me, it's Ivar, it's Walter and his wife Teresa. Wonderful lady. She's no longer with us either. But so Walter would just like, he's sitting there and he had these really dark, like, remember the old glass, like big glasses, and I think they're meant to go over like eyeglasses,
Right.
and they're really dark. And he's sitting, and then I'll try to do it. I'll try, and he's sitting in the passenger seat, and he's just watching the speedometer like this. And somebody gave me, I forget who it was, but somebody smartened me up that don't speed with Walter, because he'll get pissed. He'll get pissed off, and he does. He watches the speedometer. So I'm sitting there and I'm like white knuckling it, like I'm like, like terrified, because here's my mentor, here's this wrestling legend. At that point, I'm only in my 20s, I'm green as goose bleep, as they say. And then like all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, he'd be like, pull off, I got to piss. And it'd be like the exit's like right here. So we'd have to pull off for him to go to the bathroom. So then like, we get stopped at the border. Um, I'll leave the funny part about Ivar out, to protect him, but
Sure.
they weren't too happy with him at the border. Um, I can tell it. It's not that big of a deal. They go, they goes, has anybody been arrested in the last 30 days? And Todd had to raise his hand because it was he was driving with a suspended license, like not a
Yeah.
nothing crazy, nothing big. He's
Yeah.
not a criminal. So they're rifling through our car and they're just taking forever. And then finally Walter it was the only time I ever saw Walter pull the "Do you know who I am" card. Oh, I should add, when we get up to the border, Walter gave me he used to have those little, like, I don't know what size they are, but they're like 8x10s, but like smaller versions of maybe like a 4x6 or something that he would hand out. And he goes, hand this to the border guard. Well, the border guard didn't know wrestling at all, this guy. So that's kind of was a big, I think that was a big red flag too. But we get in there and Walter just loses it. God damn it, I'm Walter Killer Kowalski. I mean, he was a Canadian citizen too. Like he had dual citizenship. So he's not even like he's within every right to cross the border. He's a dual citizen. And and he's just yelling. And then like it must have been like a supervisor or something that came over. And the supervisor now reads the border guard like kind of the riot act of like, do you know who this is? He's a citizen. Like, and Walter would go up there a lot. He would go up there a lot for this radio station that was doing this show. And I'd say within 5 minutes we were back on our way after Walter just finally got fed up.
Wow.
So we go up there, and of course, the Kowalskis go to bed early, and we were sharing. They put us all in one room, which Walter was not happy about. It was a suite, but still, like So me and Ivar, we go out on the town. We might have ended up at a gentleman's establishment up in Quebec City at some point, and we come home and we realize we're sharing you see me, I'm at this point I go about 6'2", and at that point I was probably 330 or 40 pounds. And Ivar's about 6'2", and at that point he's probably about 260, 270 pounds, and we're sharing a pull-out love seat. And we have we put the air conditioner on because we're hot, and then all of a sudden in the middle of the night we hear Walter's wife screaming, "Shut the bleeping air conditioning off!" Like yelling at us. So that was that. And then in the morning, I get up and I go into the bathroom, and the bathroom had two doors, like one to the living room, one to their bedroom. And I go in, and there is Walter Kowalski, the legendary Walter Kowalski, in his bright yellow boxer shorts. That's all he's wearing. No wig on. And I was like, oh my God. And I just closed the door quick, and I ran and I laid back in on the love seat next to Handsome. And he's just like, what's wrong? And I said, I just saw Walter without his wig, and he's just in his boxer shorts. And somebody had told me years after that I was like, somebody had said like Triple H had seen him without his wig, and that like we might have been the only two wrestlers to ever see Walter without his wig.
Right. Oh, what a moment.
But he was a treasure, man. Like just when people like him pass, it's the magnitude of it is just because of all the history, all the legacy, all the information that goes to the grave with him. But I am forever grateful. I will remember Walter the rest of my life, and it's just somebody who I'm so grateful to have had that sort of relationship with. And I remember I did the homecoming show for Chaotic Wrestling, the famous one with Vince and John Cena, and Walter was there at it. And my dad got to meet him, and he told my dad how wonderful. My brother was a trainee at the time too, and my brother was another one. He always, and that's because of I like, hey, you treat this man with respect, and so my brother did too. And he told my dad like how he had done a good job of raising two fine boys and stuff. And so that's a pretty cool thing to have had, to know that interaction happened between Walter and my dad. So just a great man.
So, let's talk about your greatest challenge. What has your greatest challenge been? Not in the ring, but within the industry.
Yeah, I think it's honestly, it's my weight, it's my body. I fully admit that over the years, I didn't do the things that I needed to probably to get where I wanted to get. Having said that, I always felt like I was in good ring shape. I thought I had a look about me, but it's the when I talk about all the time, like you get so sick of hearing it, and any guy who's big and good, I'm sure even a guy like Kevin Owens probably heard it his entire life until he finally got to WWE. He's good, but he's good, but he's good, but and it's just the but always being, um, oh, he's good, but he's heavy. He's a big guy, and that just didn't sell anymore for some reason for a long stretch in wrestling. And that's why I do say it's great to see Ivar getting his chances. It's great to see a guy like Bronson Reed get the opportunities he's getting to work on top in WWE because man, in those early 2000s and stuff, a guy like Bronson Reed, they wouldn't have even looked at him. They wouldn't have even taken a second look at that guy. And now he's showing that he can be a main event guy. So I think that's always it's like getting over getting people to look past the point. Like, and again, I don't think I think in my later career, my later years, I definitely got heavier than I should be. And I'm heavier right now than I should be. I'm working on that. But I think, especially when I was in my, mid to late 20s into my 30s, like I thought I had a good look, and it was just getting people to look past that to see, what I could have done. And really, I think the only guy to this day that from a national TV company that really did that was Delirious. With Ring of Honor, and now he's with TNA. But he was the first guy to me who looked at me and just said, "No, you're good. I want you on my team." There was no but. I would all, it's like you always just wait for the but. I still remember this time at it was the last WWE TV I ever did. At that point, like 2011, I'm just turning 30. I got my first child on the way. I didn't even want to go. I remember the lady's name was Kristen Altman. I was literally at the emergency room with my dad, and I see it's a WWE number, and I wasn't going to take it. And my dad made me go take the call, like step outside and take the call. I'm literally in the emergency room with him because he was having chest pains and stuff. And I reluctantly, took the booking, even though I didn't want to go. I didn't tan. I didn't care. Like I just didn't, I was so burnt out from, you do, right? I mean, we all go through those times in this business where you get to your breaking points of like, this sucks. I'm tired of hearing no. I'm tired of hearing um I'm talented, but I mean, even if I had gotten I would never been a chiseled guy. Like just because of my body type and because I was heavy, I never would have ever been that, chiseled look. I was always gonna have to be an exception. And so we go to this TV and Ivar's there too, and we have a match, and this is the second time Dean Malenko did this to me. Did it to me one other time at a tryout. The only guys that were required to take off their shirts. Um, so he goes, "Take off your shirt." Oh, okay, all right. I know where this is going. I almost felt like I wanted to say, like, "Do you even want me to wrestle? Like,
Right.
do you even want to see what I can do in the ring?" So we get in the ring and we had a good match. It was just like a 5-minute match, and afterwards, though, and nobody watched it, just the people around there, and oh yeah, good job, okay, next. And then everything stops, and here comes Triple H, John Laurinaitis, Sylvain Grenier, and then these two guys that were his students. I don't know their names, but one of them was a heavy guy, like me, but actually bigger and like no muscle, and the other guy had like a spray painted cane mask and was in like this camouflage gear, and it looked like this weird. And they got to have a match in front of and I was just beside myself, like, you got to be kidding me. They had this horrible match in front of, but Laurinaitis is there watching, Triple H is there watching. Triple H actually stopped it, it was so bad, and said, all right, we've seen enough. So then we go to the back later, and Goldust he was doing like some producing and aging and stuff, and he sees me and Ivar, and he's like, and he's telling us like, how he thinks we're really good and the footwork and blah blah blah. And he goes, what about your boys there? We're like, I don't know, we don't know them. And then I just said something like, yeah, well, they have a friend, they know somebody in the business, so they'll get a legitimate look, and we won't get a legitimate look. And Goldust just kind of acknowledged, like, yeah, it's not, the business isn't fair or whatever, and that was the end of that. But that was at that point, I was pretty burnt. I was pretty just like, this sucks. I'm never going to get a look from this from this company. And I never tried to get booked for TV again. And I had done a lot from like probably like 2003, 2004 till 2011. I had done TVs all the time and just realized like, I'm just spinning my wheels doing extra work. This company's never gonna give me a real look. So um, yeah, it's the body type that I had. I feel like one time was, it really was a nice compliment. Sheldon Goldberg, promoter of NECW, longtime New England guy, said, I worked for Sheldon quite a bit, and always enjoyed it. But he said to me, he goes, Brian, you would have made money in any era except for the one that you're in. And you know, a nice compliment. I don't know if it made me feel all that great in the time at the
Yeah.
time, but I think about it now and I know what he meant. I know exactly what he meant
Yeah.
by it, and it was a really nice thing of him to say.
Yeah. That's cool. That's good. Well, I guess on the flip side of your greatest challenge, what has been most rewarding for you in your career?
Yeah, honestly, I think it's the connections that you make, and not just with the guys in the back, but I have my lifelong friends are the friends I've made in wrestling. I think of um, I met up with Tommaso this summer at Disney. That's the second time we've gotten to do that. But I think of all the hard days back at the Chaotic Training Center and things like that. And here we are at Disney World, and our kids are hanging out and playing together, and we're reminiscing, and we text and stuff. But just with his schedule and where he lives and where I live, you just don't get to see each other as much as you hope as you get older in this business. And um to just like any number, there's a lot of guys like this too. You might go, and I'm sure Joe, like you don't see somebody for years, and you just pick up like you
Yeah.
just saw him yesterday. But also the connection with the fans, because there are legitimate fans, there are people who have followed my whole career. And for anybody to think like that I'm something special, or to remember me in some way, or to have bought a t-shirt, or wanted my autograph, or wanted a picture, that's so friggin' cool. Like it's um this business is funny. And of course I'm not, at the level I've done it, and I did get to TV with Ring of Honor, but I'm not Roman Reigns, I'm not Cody Rhodes, or I'm not Hulk Hogan or those guys. But there are legitimately people out there who fondly remember my career, or who have purchased some of my gear and stuff. And I'm like, to me, that's cool. If you think enough of me to buy something from me or want a picture with me, um, I think that's rewarding as well. I think too many times we get caught up in the negativity, because there's so much negativity online with wrestling and people criticizing. But I think that's such a vocal minority of wrestling fans. Most just want to be entertained. Most just want to have a good time. So for people to kind of, spend their hard-earned money on something with me, or spending their time on something with me, or to even give a crap that I exist in this world, that's pretty cool, man. Like there's not a lot of things in life where your body of work, your life's work, the things that you're doing gets appreciated on the scale it does in something like professional wrestling. And whether it's 250 people, in a Knights of Columbus, or if it's 17,000 in Madison Square Garden, like it's pretty damn cool. So that's been definitely rewarding.
And throughout your career, all the places you've traveled to, all the different venues, do you have favorite venues over the years?
Yeah, I think the first one that comes to mind is the PAV in Lowell, Mass, which I think is like it's some sort of church now, which is so weird, because it was just this sad little, like, one half had this bar that if you went in there on any given day, it's like the saddest little bar in the history of man. Um but man, you think of the professional wrestlers that walk through those doors in that building. It's pretty incredible. Later on, I mean, obviously the obvious one, and I only worked it once, but Madison Square Garden to me, and that's, I mean, everybody wants to work there, and to me, that's, of all the goals I've ever had in wrestling, the only one that was like the actual goal that I set was the actual thing that happened was the Madison Square Garden. I said to myself, once I got in the business, I'm like, I will not step foot in Madison Square Garden unless I'm booked and I'm wrestling. And I did that. And that was really, that was really cool. So, but just that's incredible to have wrestled in that building. The one in Ring of Honor that we wrestled frequently in, that's probably, it's my favorite venue of all time, is the Hammerstein Ballroom, because that place, when it's full and it's rocking, is, I remember I did my second round top prospect match there with Josh Woods, and my first match had an air jet. So these people, like, they had no clue who we were, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we are in New York City. Neither one of us have even debuted on TV yet. We are going to get just murdered here. Like, they're going to, and at first it was some of the, like, the, who are these guys? But we got them by the end of the match, and it was. I think it's one of the things that helped me get a job in Ring of Honor, even though I didn't win the top prospect. And then the other one is Philly, the ECW arena. Just we had so many cool moments for the bouncers there. That's where we formed. That's where we did our first entrance from the bar. That's where we turned babyface. Um, it's where we main evented with the Cody and the Bucks. So literally a week before the original All In. Just a cool atmosphere, especially when that place is jammed out. And um, as a New Englander, it pains me to say my two favorite cities to wrestle in are New York City and Philly. The fans there they're just a different breed, man, and they're smart fans, but they also get into the wrestling. They're there to have a good time too. Afterwards, they'll rip you apart. Like, they'll rip you to shreds if it sucked or whatever. But when they're within the match, they get into it. They're intense. Um, I still remember that it was, um, it was the first time I started to realize that us as the bouncers were starting to get over, and we started to kind of become a thing in Ring of Honor. Was we did our entrance at Hammerstein, and I stand on a chair, and I just put my arms out, and the place came up, and I was like, this is awesome. This is awesome. And any wrestler who tells you like they're above it, or they don't have little moments like that where they mark out a little bit, they're lying. They're lying through their teeth. There are moments in your career. I mean, a lot of times you do. You don't. I definitely didn't appreciate some of the things in the moments as much as I should have. Like, to sit here and tell you that I enjoyed the Ring of Honor run as much as I should have would be a lie, because you just when you're in it, it's hard to see it. But that was definitely a moment where I was like, the people, like, I realized, like, man, we got a shot to make some noise here, because the people are starting to get with us, and to realize that in New York City, and to get that in New York City,
Yeah.
in that market, it's pretty awesome.
What would you say is the best piece of advice that you'd ever received?
Ooh. Um, I think I've gotten it from a lot of people. I think of, Mike Hollow and Jamie Jamakowski, even for friends. I mean, Bob Evans. It's just a very similar piece of advice. It was just keep going, don't quit, don't give up. Um, and it's really for anything, especially in entertainment, right? Because pro wrestling's the entertainment business. Um, this stuff is one in a million. But if you really want to do something special, if you really want to get to that next level, if you really want to make some noise, I mean, some people, right? They step in, they, I think of a guy like Kofi, who, his road in WWE has been a long and arduous one, but to get there, he was just so damn talented and unique that he got there in like 8 months. Um, but it's just having that perseverance. Don't quit. Keep going. Um, you know, reinvent yourself 1,000 times if you have to, like get in front of the right eyeballs 1,000 times if you have to, but just keep going. If you want to do something in this business and you have the talent, I mean, a lot of it really is a game of you know of longevity, or just stick to itiveness. There's so many people who, I could probably, me and you could, and we'll spare the listeners and viewers of this, of the no names that we'd have to list. But how many talented guys we saw that just like they were in it just because they wanted to be famous or rich, and they had a ton of talent and then quit as soon as it got hard. Wrestling's a hard and lonely business at times. You're gonna have your heart broken. You're gonna have your body broken. You're gonna have your spirit your spirit broken. But if you want this, you gotta push through that. You gotta push through the hard times, because the rewards on the other side of it, the things you get to do, the people you get to interact with, are if you love this business, it's absolutely worth it. I sit here, I have a bad back, a bad knee. I'm staring at a knee replacement here, probably in the next 5 to 10 years. Um, Probably looking at some back surgery. I haven't gotten my neck looked at yet, but I think there's probably something going on there. I didn't get quite to where I wanted to, but I got to tell you, I don't have regrets as far as like I have regrets as far as like, I wish I would have done this differently, but that's all hindsight. I don't have any regrets of getting in the business. I knew what I signed up for. Um I'm in a lot of pain on a day-to-day basis, which anybody who wrestled for 20 plus years is going to be, but I wouldn't change it for the world. The only thing I would probably change is a WWE run and maybe my bank account a little bit. But other than that, like I wouldn't change a thing. This has been the privilege of a lifetime to be in this business and to interact with the people I have, and to perform with the people I have. And I've performed with world champions. I've performed with international stars. I've performed with guys that nobody's ever heard of. And I've loved all of it. The one thing that can never be taken away, no matter how hard the backstage stuff can get, people talk about politics and things like that. And I think some of that is like, it's how much you get yourself involved with it. And I was bad early on at getting myself involved with that nonsense. And you kind of realize, like, that's just stupid stuff. But as hard as this business can be, the thing that nobody can ever touch is when you're in the ring, the performance aspect. And there's nothing in my life that I have found that makes me feel like I do when I pop through the curtain and I get to be the Kingpin and I get to be that character. And it's kind of like, it's kind of like an escape, Brian Milonas is a human being and a father and a guy trying to make it best as he can and put food on the table for his kids and all the problems that life throws at you. But the Kingpin, that dude has his stuff together. He's untouchable, and to perform that character and to get that live, you know, it's the live feedback really. Like I've auditioned for movies and stuff over the years, and I could never be an actor. Like I'm not good at that. And it's the feeding off of the live crowd that just is
Right.
to receive that energy and feel what that feels like. I mean, still to this day, I mean, everybody thinks about like going over and winning championships and blah, blah, blah. But, it's when I feel like some of the most rewarding times are when I'm laying on my back and I'm getting pinned and the crowd is counting and the crowd explodes at the finish. There's not too many things in life uh, that feel like that, and it's pretty cool.
And you're traveling from show to show all these years. Did you have travel buddies, travel partners? Did you travel alone?
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, my frequent ones on the indies were always, it was Ivar, it was Tommaso, it was Max Bauer. Those were probably my regular buddies. As later on, as I got as I started to become more on the training end and more on the veteran end of things, I would travel a lot with Julian Starr, Biff Busick, even Mercedes. She would come to shows. I remember, Ring of Honor show I did. She came along with me, so I really started to bring my students and tried to bring my students places. Ring of Honor, I mean, traveling with the Bruiser, that was always. But it's funny. We were always in like the mishmash car. You had like Villain Enterprises would all travel together, and then you'd have like the Kingdom would travel together, but we were always like, I'd be in cars with Jay Lethal a lot. the Motor City Machine Guns, they were fun to travel with. Um, I've traveled with Delirious. But I mean, the Bruiser. I mean, we were married to each other on the road. So, um, man, we had some good ass times, just drinking beers and I think our favorite thing that people think like, oh, you guys must have wild parties and things like that, and they never really. Like the Ring of Honor crew was always. I mean, I remember it's funny. It was such um poetic, like I don't know, it was poetic in a way because we didn't know it was going to be the last time we would ever be together as a group, right before COVID, and we were in St. Louis, and I don't know, St. Louis is like a city apparently that everything rolls up at 9 o'clock, so we had no place to go, so we just all ordered like a bunch of pizza. Everybody, I mean, the amount of beer and liquor that was just kind of and they let us, like, we were in the hotel lobby. Is probably, that is still the most tight knit group I've ever been around, especially after the elite left. It really galvanized the locker room because people were writing the Ring of Honor, death certificate already, and it really galvanized us. But I just, it was like the entire locker room, the camera people, the referees, everybody, production, everybody was always invited. I talk to, still to this day, I'll talk to production people and office people from Ring of Honor just as much as I'll talk to the boys, um, from Ring of Honor. Just was the how tight we were. But everybody eating pizza, drinking beer. But the thing that me and Bruiser used to do the most would be we we'd get our beer, we'd go back, and sometimes people would pop in our room and hang out, and we would just watch bad wrestling. He would show me the bad indie stuff from out in his area, and I'd show him some of the classics from here in New England, and we would just sit there and drink beers and laugh. I've been pretty on record of talking about I did develop a drinking problem and had to quit drinking, and but it's one of those things I regret letting it get out of control, but I don't ever regret one good time that I've had sharing drinks with my friends and reminiscing and having good times, because it was a wonderful time. Being on the road is such a, you're away from people, and granted, we didn't have the schedule that WWE had back in the day. We were on the, probably like 3 out of 5 weekends we'd be on the road. But it's still tough. You're away from your family. I think, my wife was home with the kids, and my kids were young during that time, and that wasn't the funnest experience for her. And I get to go wrestle, and granted, I'm bringing money into the house, but I'm also having a pretty good time while I'm while I'm doing it. Um, but it's still, you just bond. It's just different when you're kind of living with somebody, and like, even if it's for a few days at a time and traveling, and you got these hours, you just play these stupid, you just find stupid things to amuse yourselves on, like a 4 hour road trip. And yeah, I love it. I'd go back on the road in a second if I could.
And when you're on the road, did you have any favorite food spots? Like, you go into a certain city and you're like, man, we got to hit that place. You look forward to it.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely get into, trying to stay away from chain places, although sometimes you have those regional chains. But I think of, like, going to Philly. Tony Luke's, that was my spot in Philly. New York, I forget the place. It's right around the corner. It's right across from Madison Square Garden. Good little pizza place. But some of, like, I mean, Waffle House. Everybody talks about Waffle House. By the way, I might lose fans and friends over this. I think Waffle House is the most overblown thing I've ever been to. It's mediocre diner food at best. I remember I went crazy for Cookout. I don't know, people know what this chain of restaurants is. I think it's down like the Carolinas and stuff, but I'd never been. Dan Moff had never been, and Jeff Cobb had never been. And we're all big guys. We like to eat. So they bring us to Cookout, and you start to realize, like, how cheap everything is, and like their sides aren't just like fries and stuff. It's like you get a quesadilla as like a side, and then the giant milkshake. So I remember the three of us were like little kids, and we each have these giant trays of food at at Cookout. So yeah, but I always tried to just find like local little hole in the wall places. I remember me and Bruiser ended up in some random neighborhood in Philly one time, eating at this little. It was the most delicious chicken and waffles I've ever had in my life. I also feared for my life in the neighborhood we were in, but it was worth it. So I always just found myself, Yeah, you gotta try the local cuisine. You gotta stay away from the chain stuff. That's my advice to not just wrestlers, anybody traveling. Stay away from the chains. Go find the little neighborhood joints. Go find little, even try to stay away from the tourist trap stuff. Um, as many times I've been to Philly, I've never been to what are the Geno's and Pat's. I've never been to those. Like I always wanted to find, and somebody had turned me on to Tony Luke's, which I think there's some. I'm pretty sure it's like a famous ECW fight story or something that took place at
Sounds
at
familiar,
Tony
actually.
Luke's.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's right around the corner from the ECW arena. Like you can walk to it from the
Okay.
ECW arena. Great cheese. I think it's something different. They changed the name. There's some Family Feud, and they're different now. They have a different name, but it's the same place. But yeah, good stuff. Get the Cooper Sharp.
Okay. All right. So hypothetical, looking at a dream match, if you could put a dream match together,
Ooh.
somebody from maybe before your era, somebody during your era that you never worked with, somebody who's coming up today, who would that dream match be against?
Yeah, I mean, I've always said being man. If I could pick anything, let me go make $10,000 a night doing being the monster of the month, doing the loop with the Hulkster back in the '80s. That would be the thing. But if I think of a wrestler from my childhood, who I think of like, man, I think we could have had. I mean, and the guy I'm about to name, like, he had great matches with everybody, but Randy Savage, like, oh, that would have been tremendous to wrestle a guy like Randy Savage. The ones that were realistic, one that was realistic that really just I lobbied for it hard, and it just never worked out. Was Jay Lethal? I wanted to have a singles match with Jay Lethal in the worst way. Just because I think Jay Lethal at his peak at different times might have legitimately been the best professional wrestler in the world, and certainly a guy top five at different points of his career. Um, and just that time was in Ring of Honor. I would have loved to test myself. But against a guy like Jay Lethal, to me that was the match in Ring of Honor for me. Like we got to wrestle the Briscoes a lot, which was, I mean, those guys are the best wrestlers I've ever stepped foot in the ring with and worked with. Right up there. Tommaso. I was lucky too. Tommaso Ciampa, one of the best wrestlers in the world. I got to train with him every week. Ivar. But the match that really got away from me, I think that I lobbied hard for was Jay Lethal.
Hmm. And you're still friends with Tommaso, like you mentioned, to this day. You've worked with him in the ring as Tommaso. You've worked with him as Thomas Penmanship. Rewinding back to that time period when he was Thomas Penmanship, did you see it? Did you think, wow, this guy's going to go somewhere, or, being such a unique gimmick at that time?
Yeah, I don't think I would have sat here and told you I thought he was going to have the success that he's had, especially when he was Tommy Penmanship. I think really when you started to see it with Tommaso was after he started to get out of the Tommy Penmanship stuff. And he's a guy, he made that work, by the way. Like the fact
Yeah.
that Tommy Penmanship worked at any level of professional wrestling, whether it be the indies or not, like the fact that worked is a testament to him. Tommaso is the hardest working guy I've ever been around in my life, not just wrestling. He's the hardest working person I've ever been around. And um he he's always going to find a way. Always going to find a way. And that's when I talk about perseverance and never taking no for an answer. Tommaso's the epitome of that. He's I think they list him as 6'1" or something. Tommaso might be 5'10" on his best day. He's probably gonna be mad if he hears that, but he's not a big guy. Like you look at him, he's not a big guy. That wasn't gonna stop him. He's got two bad knees. That wasn't gonna stop him. He injured his neck. That wasn't gonna stop him. He left Ring of Honor. That wasn't gonna stop him. He knew his worth. He was gonna get to, he got to WWE. NXT wasn't going to be the final stop. He was going to find a way. And that's just who Tommaso is. So, leaving WWE and people think like, oh man, this guy's crazy. He's walking away from uh, the biggest wrestling company in the world. I had no doubts. I had no doubts he's going to find a way. Tommaso knows his worth. He knows his value. He knows how good he is. and he doesn't rest on those laurels. He works tirelessly until he gets to where he wants to be. And I don't know when this will drop, but I just last night watched him versus Mark Briscoe, and what a debut! Wins the TNT championship, but what a match! He's going to be the AEW world champion, and when his contract is up, it wouldn't shock me in the slightest bit if WWE came calling with a very large offer to Tommaso, because I think he's going to be a tippy top guy in AEW and show the world how good he is, because that's what he set his sights on, and that's what he saw for himself in WWE. And I don't want to speak for Tommaso, but I don't think they saw that in him, and he knew that. And okay, I'll just go do that somewhere else. And he's incredible, man. He's incredible. He's the hardest working guy I've ever met. And he's just never going to take no for an answer. If Tommaso sets his mind on something, it's happening. It might take a while, but he's never going to give up, and he's going to get there. So that's he's an inspiration to a lot of people because of that.
I'm excited to see what's to come for sure, because you and I both know he's fully capable. So it's going to be fun.
Oh yeah. And he has been since, it's funny. I'll tell you what, you want a little Easter egg for your listeners, and maybe even maybe you don't know this exists, Joe, but there's a match out there between a couple guys by the name of Ricky Thomas versus Kofi Johnson. It's on YouTube if you search it, and it's Tommaso Ciampa versus Kofi Kingston. This is, again, Kofi was only in the Indies for about 8-9 months, so it was for Bobby Cruz. I think he was booking like XWA or something, and Ricky Thomas versus Kofi Johnson, and it is very early versions of Tommaso Ciampa and Kofi Kingston.
Wow, I've never seen that.
Yeah, little Easter egg out there, and it's a fun one. It's a fun one for sure.
That's awesome. I always love seeing the beginnings of different people. So yeah, I'll have to check that out for sure.
Yeah.
So chiming in your inner fan briefly, looking at Mount Rushmore, there's different ways you can look at it. Obviously, personal favorites, or who you think should be there because of fame or money made for the company. But any way you want to look at it, who is your personal Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, I think it's anyone starts with I think say what you want about him or controversies or stuff, but Hulk Hogan, the business isn't where it is without him today. When I think of the Mount Rushmore stuff, is if you take this person out of the history of the business, does the business get to the heights that it has? And Hulk Hogan, you gotta start there. Recency bias, I guess, but I think John Cena. Does he have the longest main event run in WWE history at this point? Because you think of the Hulkamania was less than 10 years. Steve Austin's run was 3 or 4 years. The Rock's career, like when he was actually a full-time wrestler, was only 7 or 8 years, maybe. These guys were very, very brief, but John Cena was on top. It's only really in the last like 6 or 7 years that he wasn't on our TVs every single week. So I think John Cena belongs up there. I think Stone Cold Steve Austin belongs up there. And then the other guy, and this might seem like a little out of left field, but I think it's Andre the Giant, because of people think of Andre and they think of WrestleMania 3, which is really it's the tail end. But they don't think of all the years of him being a top attraction all over the world. To get to that point, for that moment to mean what it did, he had to be Andre the Giant. And it wasn't just because he was a tall guy or whatever. It wasn't just because he was a giant. Like, he was the top attraction in the world for all throughout the 70s. Like that. That's the funny thing when you look at the WWF of the 80s. For so many of those guys, their best days were behind them. Like, I think of Jimmy Snuka or Don Morocco or Greg Valentine or Andre the Giant. All of their best days were behind them. They were all Bob Orton. They had been huge stars in the 70s and early 80s. and I feel like some of them were there just because they had helped build the WWF into what it was beforehand. But I think Andre's a guy, yeah. So mine would be, Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, John Cena, and Andre the Giant. I know, you leave off some really important guys. Like I think of a Ric Flair, there, but Ric Flair is arguably the greatest in-ring performer of all time. But if we're being honest, I mean, Ric Flair was more of a regional guy than he was, like a national guy.
Yeah.
So the best matches of his career were not seen at the time by the masses.
Yeah.
So it's um, those are the four that I would certainly roll with. Of course, there's always controversy over that because I mean, you could argue The Rock, you could argue Shawn Michaels, you could argue Bret Hart, you could argue Ric Flair.
Yeah.
It's just, but hey, that's a good problem to have when you have this much greatness.
Right. And at the end of the day, like I said, it's a personal preference, so you can look at it many different ways, and your answers could change a week from now. If you're thinking of different
Yeah,
things.
I've always
But
gravitated to the thing that sucked me into wrestling is the emotional part of it, the larger than life characters. Um, I had wonderful parents, but maybe not the greatest upbringing. We were very poor, lots of stuff. So I was one of those kids where professional wrestling was an escape for me, man. It was an escape from my reality. Um, so I really like connected with and resonated with the larger than life aspects of pro wrestling. Even today, um, when I'm working with the younger generation and stuff, aside from the good and fundamental in ring training, but I always try to just instill in them like you have to be something bigger than who you are as like the person outside the ring. You have to be more. People pay to see wrestling, but the people they resonate with, it's I don't know. They're not gonna, they don't want to think about you as a normal human being. They're looking for that escape and that entertainment too. So you got to be, you know, to me, that larger than life personality. They shouldn't be able to feel like anyone in their real life is like you when they go meet them. They should never get to go in their life. Oh, Brian Milonas is like my neighbor Joe or whatever, the Kingpin Brian Milonas should feel like, this guy is a cartoon character that's come to life. And that's how, and I think there's many ways to do that. I'm not talking about having like a goofy gimmick or something like that. Like you can feel um, like Randy Orton, he's a guy, like he absolutely does not feel like a real person, like the character that you see on TV, but he's just a guy with a name and he's a wrestler, but you know, he doesn't
yeah.
feel like, or he feels like a cartoon character come to life. So I think that's always the thing that resonates with me.
And two of the greats to come out of the New England scene, Latin Fury, Luis Ortiz, the Demon, and the Hurricane, John Walters. Any memories they have working with either of them over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I'll say John was one of the guys. Again, I was a knucklehead in the beginning. I wasn't a nice guy, I guess, or no, I wouldn't say I wasn't a nice guy, but I didn't have. I had to learn the qualities that I feel like are some of my strong points now. And John Walters was a guy who, I mean, I've had a lot of great matches with him. And as a matter of fact, I think one of the coolest experiences in Ring of Honor was during the pandemic era. But Ring of Honor had brought him back in, and here I am in a ring with John Walters and Todd Sinclair, two guys who literally on my when I say day one, literally my first day of wrestling school, John Walters and Todd Sinclair were there, and here I am filming a TV match with them, and that was pretty cool. But John was a guy who early on showed me a lot of kindness, and even when I didn't deserve it, he showed me a lot of kindness and legitimately tried to help me. And Louis was a guy who, I mean, he was always trying to come up with like gimmick ideas for me or gear ideas. He's just like Louis is he's so damn creative and like smart. And he's the guy. I mean, he was talking about some of the international scenes before I heard anybody else looking at it or watching it. The Japanese scene, the Mexican scene, like he was. I mean, he was stealing stuff from those guys before it became like a popular thing to kind of steal those styles. And working with him, he just was always so creative. He always had creative ideas. He knew how to connect with an audience. He knew how to play stuff. Those are two guys who I've said. A million times where if today was their primes, they would be in AEW. They might even be in WWE. Like they'd be making money and they'd be on TV. they were that damn talented. Louis was just ahead of his time. When I look at Luis Ortiz, just ahead of his time, is what comes to mind with him. But two guys who I'm a better professional wrestler. I became a better professional wrestler working with them, especially my formative years, the years that really where you really start to learn, and in every time you're working with somebody, you're learning. And those were two important guys, because I did, John just being the technician he is, and Lewis with his creativity. Like they helped me tremendously. Love both those guys.
And you have so much experience in the ring. And there's so many other promotions that you've worked for over time. Proving Ground, Shakara, Northeast Wrestling, Lucky Pro Wrestling, APW, PVP, Zero One, NWA Power. What advice do you have for somebody who is looking to get into the business now?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I actually threw it out on my Facebook, and that's just don't. I wasted a lot of years of my life, and look, this is not me bashing WWE or anything like that. They're the biggest wrestling company in the world. I would have done anything to have gotten an opportunity to work there. But don't only set your sights on us. Don't have that singular focus, right? Um, because a lot of times it's not the direct route to WWE, right? When you think of, I'm going to train, I'm going to work the indies, I'm going to get signed to developmental, I'm going to go to NXT, I'm going to go to Raw, SmackDown. That happens for even just the percentage of people who get to WWE, the percentage that happens for, like, in that manner, is very small. Like, it's just not the likely path. Like, I think sometimes you got to go out and you got to make a name for yourself, and you got to do things that put yourself on their radar, just beyond being like, oh, this is an unknown guy who's a good worker. Um, I think of, like, that's what Kevin Owens did, right? He went out and made a name for himself, and and it would have been a guy who was never on the WWE radar, but because of all the things he was able to do outside and other places. And I wish I would have learned that younger. Um, I told a story on my Facebook of, I wrestled Delirious just out of the blue. I wrestled him up in Vermont on a show, and he was just like, "Man, who are you? Where did you come from?" Like, and that led to a tryout match. I did like a 10-man tag in, like, Plymouth, Mass. Taven was in it,
Hmm.
um, and they were interested in me and said, you need to come down to a tryout. And I was like, well, I don't even really care about working here. I just want to work for WWE. I'm not going to pay for a tryout, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm not saying that to them, but I'm like, yeah, oh, yeah, I'll be down there. Yeah, I'll give you $300. And I just think of, like, if I would have done that, I might have gotten a job earlier. But just don't have that tunnel vision. Um, the wrestling business is a diverse and large space. There's many promotions, many styles. I would always say, it's the same. It's almost like financial advice. Diversify your portfolio. Go as many places as you can. Learn from as many places as you can. Learn from as many people as you can. Learn different styles. Watch different things. Go wrestle different places. Try to get to different areas, because wrestling's a little different in the South than it is up here versus out west. Or if you go to Mexico, or if you go to Canada, or if you go to Europe, the more, unless you're just this, um, incredible talent who WWE just sees you and they're just like, oh my God, we got to have this guy, and we're going to develop him, and, um, go out and diversify your portfolio, make the name for yourself everywhere. And I think it gives you just as good a shot as you would have had if you stuck around the place you did. So and this is all on me. I think sometimes I say these things and people think it's like, oh, I'm not trashing chaotic wrestling, but chaotic wrestling had a singular focus, and their goals at the time were all aligned with WWE. And they were giving us the best possible advice that they thought for us, but that doesn't mean the advice was the best for us. Their intentions were the best. But if I had to do it all over again, I absolutely would have pursued other opportunities. I would have trained different places. Um, I would have taken that opportunity with Ring of Honor. This is all hindsight, by the way.
Yeah.
But that's the advice that I do give guys, is just don't, um, don't just limit yourself to one thing. Don't just have, WWE is the ultimate goal, right? That's, the ultimate prize, but there's a lot of things along the way that are cool parts of the journey, or things you can do to set yourself up, that if you ever do get that opportunity with WWE, that you'll be better for it anyways. You'll be actually in a better position to succeed if you do get there, if you've done the things along the way that diversified your portfolio.
And it is nice that you have other locations now that you can make a living, without having to go to WWE. So
yeah, the indies now. I mean, just a quick aside, but a guy who I, got the pleasure of meeting and spending time with, and was Colt Cabana, and he's a guy who I think is like, he's never going to get to do that he deserves, because he predates the Young Bucks. I think everybody points to the Young Bucks. I think Colt Cabana is about one of the first guys like really making that living, hustling, doing the podcast. I mean, he's the first doing the podcast. He was one of the first guys with merchandising, and um, Colt Cabana is a really important guy in the history of pro wrestling, and I don't think enough people know that and understand that. Yeah, you can make a living on the indies. Are you going to get rich on the indies? No, but you can, make enough money to live and pursue your dream, which is the important thing.
So an infamous show that you were a part of, the Boston Wrestling Marathon, you wrestled twice that weekend. One of those matches was against Tatanka. I think you're the first person we ever spoke to that was a part of that show. What were your memories personally from that weekend?
Oh man, I wasn't even scheduled to be on it. That was like a last second thing. So I was like, "You want to come down and wrestle Tatanka?" I negotiated my price or whatever. Which at that point, it wasn't like I was making crazy money or anything. But just to go work with Tatanka, I have such a positive experience with him. Like he was like, so he sees me and like he got excited. I could, just from, that's the only time I've ever been around Tatanka, but I think he's a guy who likes the physicality of wrestling. And he just starts, he's like, look, I don't want you to go light with me. He's like, he's slapping his chest. I'm a bull. He's like, you come, you bring it. And I think the hardest shots I've ever taken in a professional wrestling ring happened that weekend. The tomahawk chop he did with his hand to my head. My goodness. But that was a lot of fun. I remember I got to go out to lunch with Kevin Sullivan, which was, pretty cool to go just to have lunch with him. And but obviously the big thing about that weekend is just the absolute bleep show that it turned into. And it was a really ambitious thing. And somebody really should have said to the promoter, like, do you really think having however many shows it was in the same building with the same mix of wrestlers is going to attract the audience you think it is? Like, I feel like there was a lot, so many times in wrestling, and you're going to know this exactly what I'm talking about. People see money and they become blinded by it. And some of the good advice, I think people saw money and a chance to make money in that opportunity, and didn't really care about giving the guy good advice to run it properly. I'll say this: I got every penny that I was promised in that regard, but I just remember the end of the night there. I don't even remember who I wrestled on the second show. Maybe Tatanka was the second show, and I wrestled Nick Westgate or something in the afternoon.
I think you're right. Yep.
I just remember there being a lot of drama and people hiding and people crying and ready to be fist fights. And I think Robert Gibson got like stranded at the airport, like he landed in Boston and nobody was there to pick him up. And they had canceled the Sunday shows already. Just a just a calamity of errors. And yeah, I don't know. I feel like the promoter is absolutely to blame, and he should have been sharply criticized for it. But I think there were a lot of people reaching into his pocket, giving him some bad advice because they thought they could make a few bucks on it too. So, plenty of blame to go around there. An ambitious, certainly an ambitious undertaking. But maybe one somebody should have, somebody who was looking out for the promoter's best interest should have said, "Hey, I don't know if this is the idea you think it is." So.
Right. And obviously, other people have spoken about it. A lot of people have talked about it. The Chaotic Homecoming 2007. We've never heard your point of view, on this platform. So for the fans, if you can kind of go Into detail, briefly. 2007, yourself, Rick Fuller, obviously John Cena is the special guest referee. The involvement of Vince McMahon, it's chaotic wrestling. Just kind of take us back to that night.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the most unusual thing that happened, right? John is a nice guy, and we knew John had actually um he'd come to train like when he first got on the road with WWE. He would come to train with us. Sometimes on the weekends, a lot of times on like Tuesday or Wednesday. He was there. So like, he had a familiarity with us anyways. And I had locked up and worked with John Cena in training a number of times. And the thing that sticks out the most is he meticulously put together the whole finishing sequence, like meticulously, like went over it and over it and over it, and needed us to have it down. And I didn't think anything of it at the time, other than like, he's the WWE champ. Like he just wants things to go. If he's going to be involved with it, he wants it just to go a very specific and certain way. I certainly didn't think for in a million years that it was because Vince McMahon was going to show up. But we did like a double down spot, and you can, the video's out there. It's on my TikTok actually, and I'm selling up, and I turn around, and I saw like out of the corner of my eye somebody get in the ring. No, I don't know. And at that point, I was probably I couldn't tell you who I thought it was. I probably thought in the ring. I probably was thinking it was Johnny Fabulous, John Cena Senior, getting in the ring or something, because it was a guy. It was somebody in a suit, and he was the only guy out there in a suit. And I look, and it's Vince McMahon, and he's like got his arms out, and the crowd's going crazy, and I'm just like, what is happening right now? Like, I don't know. Did I die or something? Like, did I take a shot to the head? Am I unconscious? Am I dreaming? Like, what the hell is going on? So he comes over and goes, "Are you the heel or the baby face?" And I go, "I'm the heel." And he raises my hand and he shows me around, and I go, "Man," I go, what's next? I couldn't even look cool, by the way. My mouth was just like a gate, because I'm like, what is happening? Like, how do you even react to that? Like,
Right.
I'm on an indie show. The WWE champs is here, which I knew, right? I processed that. That's fine. That's really cool. But why is Vince McMahon here? Um, and he goes, "I'm slapping Cena. I'm taking an FU, and I'm getting out of here." And I go, "Okay." And they did their thing, and I just kind of ducked down, because at that point, nobody gives a crap that I'm in the ring. You got, on an indie show, you got John Cena and Vince McMahon squaring off,
Right.
which I don't know if that had even happened on WWE TV at that point. I don't think it had. Like, I think,
I
he
don't think
wasn't like a huge adversary to Cena like he was to Austin.
right.
Um, and then, so he does, right? He slaps Cena. They have their little thing, gives him the FU. The crowd goes crazy. And John just starts saying to me, like, FU, 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 FU. And he's not telling me to go F myself. That's what his move used to be called. So he picks me up and he gives me that, and I roll out. And Cherry Payne, who was my manager at the time, she's the best. Like, I grab her. I'm laying on the ground. I grab her. I think I might have hugged her or something. And I said, "That was the greatest bleeping moment of my entire life." Um, and we get to the back, and everybody is just like, what the hell just happened? And of course, changing in the locker room afterwards with, John's there, and we're just kind of talking about it. And he's like, "Oh, that was a good surprise, huh?" And I was like, "Yeah, a little bit of one." And exchanged information with him so I could stay in touch. I'll say this about John. um One of the nicest, most humblest guys I've ever met. He had no reason to give two craps about me. And then every time after that moment, see him at TV, "Big man Milonas, how's chaotic? How's this? How's that?" Just a nice guy. And then so about a week after that, and this is always the funniest side, and this is always the good cherry on top of the story. About a week after that, I was booked in Boston as an extra, and I'm just like, I have an in to talk to Vince. I was like, and at that point, I was like, what do I got to lose? Like, if I talk to him. So I hadn't seen him all night. So at the Garden in Boston, there's kind of one area where like you have to go through to exit to where like the wrestler parking is. It might be different now, but at that point, there was one hallway you had to take. I just parked my ass in that hallway. I was like, Vince hasn't left yet. I know he hadn't left yet. because during the main event, he was still in Gorilla, and I had heard he leaves the shows pretty quickly. So I just went and positioned myself in this hallway, and here he comes. Sure shit. He comes walking down the hallway. And I go, Mr. McMahon? And he just kind of looks at me like, who the hell is this guy like saying my name? I said, and I think he realized it, So I go, I don't know if you remember me. I said, but we were in the ring together last week on the independent show you did. And I said, I just wanted to thank you. I said, that was really amazing and incredible experience for me. And of course, in my mind, I'm hoping like this leads to something. I don't know what my expectations were, but like, hey, you know what? Could this be an end? Could this be a kicking down the back door type
Yeah.
of thing? Like, I don't know. But he looks at me and he goes, "Oh, you're welcome." And then he just walks off. Now, in my mind, he's doing the Vince walk. I'm sure he just walked normal. But yeah, I talked to Vince. I thanked him, and he told me I was welcome. And all these years later, I still don't have a job with him. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it was cool, man. It was. I've been asked to tell that story so many times. I remember, even a couple years ago, it might have been like 3 years ago now. We lost Jay Briscoe. Horrible situation, but I was at his funeral, and I'd never met Jimmy Jacobs in my life, and we're just sitting there at the meal afterwards. And he goes, "I know you from somewhere," and I go, "I don't know." I said, "We've never met." I said, "I know who you are." Like, I said, I've been with Ring of Honor now, and he goes, "No." He goes, and then I don't know if it might have been like Matt Taven who goes, "Oh, he's the guy that was in the ring with Vince and Cena." He goes, "I knew it." He's like, "I just saw you talking about it," or something. So it's funny. All these years later, like and I've had people in Ring of Honor. Like I remember I was in a car ride once, and somebody was like, "All right, Cena, Vince, talk about it."
Yeah.
So
Well, that's
it's a
the thing. I
cool,
mean, from an
yeah.
independent standpoint, there's no way that could be topped, so it's as big as it gets.
Well, that's what I did, Joe. I gave the world the greatest independent wrestling moment in the history of the business. So
Yeah.
I'm clearly an integral part. I mean, I should have put myself on Mount Rushmore.
Right.
No, it's a really cool. I mean, there are guys who work for WWE for decades that have never been in the ring with the WWE champ or Vince McMahon, let alone both of them, and I got to do that. That was that's again just cool things, just cool things. It didn't put a cent in my pocket, but it was people. If you don't, I've been so many years, so many times that people who aren't aware of that been accused of making that story up, and I'm like, I get it. I get it. It sounds fake. It doesn't sound real.
Yeah, if you didn't have the video to go with it, it would be,
Oh, nobody'd believe it for a second.
right. Yeah. One of those tall tales, And
Yeah.
another highlight that I have to ask you about 2010, the Super 8 tournament, real quick, Austin Creed, your memories of ECWA and being there for that, and your memories of Jim Kettner.
Oh, Jim, I'll tell you this. Jim is the smartest promoter I've ever worked for. I've never seen somebody put like he just really is just smart the way he builds stuff, the way he times things out. I remember I wrestled the Japanese pool boy. There's a name from the
Yeah.
from the past. And the match was horrible, and we went over by a few minutes. And the pool boy was very like, "Oh, I'll take the heat on it. I'll take the heat on it." He did not take the heat on it, and man, did Jim Kettner let me have it. Like, let me have it. And he rightfully so. I went over on time. But when he asked me to be in the Super 8, like, so he pulls, I worked, this was years after that Japanese pool boy incident. I just came in to do like a spot show for him. And I thought it was weird that he booked me, but I was like, hey, he must just have a spot he wants me in. And I couldn't even tell you who I wrestled on that show. I did truthfully don't remember. But he pulls me aside and goes, "Hey, I want you to be in the Super 8." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I want you to be in the Super 8." And I was like, "Yes, that's amazing." I never thought in a million years, because that's a junior heavyweight tournament. Like when you think of the Super 8, it's the junior heavyweight tournament. And so I was just blown away. And then, to get to work with, Austin Creed, Xavier Woods, it was really fun. Like I remember, because at that point I had gotten in really good shape. I was like right around the 300-pound mark, like almost below 300, and I could do like like springboard, like twisting crossbody. And I told him this, and I was like, he kind of looks at me. I'm like, yeah, I can do it. I promise you, I can do it. I said, I just need you to feed into it, and we did it. But yeah, ECWA was a great place. Being the Super 8, something I never thought in a million years that I would ever be a part of. And then it's funny. This is like right in the build up to like WrestleMania 40. And WWE was in New Hampshire, and I was just talking to Kofi, and I go, he has us come back to say hi to him, and I literally hadn't seen Woods um, since the Super 8, um, and he comes over because we're talking to Kofi, and Kofi introduces us, and I go, we actually worked one time, and he goes, I knew you looked familiar, the Super 8, and I said, yes, the Super 8, and he goes, how have you been? He's like, what have you been up to? And I said, oh, at that point I was still working. I was like, yeah, I still work. I said I was with Ring of Honor for a spell. I said, what have you been up to? Did your career ever take off? And we laughed, and I took a picture with the two of them and stuff. But yeah, it was a very cool experience. I think I hold the distinction of being the largest guy to ever be in the Super 8 and the largest guy to ever be in the Ring of Honor Top Prospect tournament. So
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe a dubious honor.
Hey, a lot of highlights in your career, that is for sure. And you obviously said you've got some surgeries coming up possibly down the line. But what is next for Brian Milonas?
Yeah, I think look, it's been a nice break to the last, little bit. I was training at, Beyond Institute of Pro Wrestling, the Beyond Wrestling School, and that was great. I had some, great students that I was able to help out, and I still stay in contact with. Long term, I don't know if that's what I want to be. The training, like I certainly like helping people, but I don't know if being like a week to week trainer and having to put together class lessons and class plans. I think I'd like to do some consulting in pro wrestling. Kind of working on a business idea to do some pro wrestling consulting. So looking to get that off the ground at some point, and um, talking to a few people about like, hey, it's time to get back involved with a promotion or something. So hopefully I'll be, well, maybe not popping up as far as a performer, but certainly working behind the scenes. And the things I love and the things I want to do is help kind of the next generation avoid some of the mistakes that I made, and just try to help people with the things of like putting matches together and their presentation. And I think the things that I've been strong with, or have a strong mind for, this is the unfortunate thing with pro wrestling, Joe, is the sharper your mind gets, the less sharp your body gets. And I'm at a point where it's like, man, I feel like if I could still wrestle, um, I feel like my mind is so sharp, and that's what honestly, that's what it really is. Like so many people have asked, oh well, if you get back in shape, why don't you wrestle? And it's like, man, I could get down to 180 pounds, which nobody wants to see, by the way. That would be horrific. But I just should never take another bump in my life. It's I gave all I felt like I gave all I could physically, and I don't want to be somebody who's taking spots on a show based on a reputation from over the years, but maybe one that I can't live up to anymore. And I look at this current generation, and um, I'm like, I don't think I could keep up with these guys, and I don't want to take spots from people who you know who need those reps. And I could selfishly hang on and have the I could have good matches still, as far as like, oh, I wouldn't be pushing the envelope, but they'd be entertaining. But that's more just because of my brain. And I'm always a guy, I did like to push things physically. I like the physicality. But I also realized, Father Time is undefeated, and it was time to just say, hey, you know what? I just can't hold up to the beating anymore. But I want to contribute in meaningful ways behind the scenes, and ultimately long term. I mean, I would love to hook on, whether it be with WWE or AEW or TNA or one of those companies. But I feel like the journey's gonna be just like it was, you know, um, coming up as a wrestler. I feel like I got to go cut my teeth, in some smaller promotions and local promotions, and and then see where it takes me. But ultimately, yeah, I would love to one day end up working for one of the big companies doing something backstage. I still love professional wrestling. My mind feels refreshed from taking a little break and giving myself that space. I hadn't taken that space, and if you look at my career, I never ever had those like breaks where, you know, the guys, they disappear for a year or two. I never did that.
Yeah.
Because I just loved it, and I, you know, probably to my detriment, there were probably some times where I should have taken a step back and I didn't. In the last couple of years, um, you know, really, you know, I was at Bio, and I stepped away from there about a year ago. Um, and the last year is really just, but now I'm like, I'm raring to go. Like, I watch stuff and I'm like, I'm rearing to go. The creative juices are flowing, and now I feel like the physical aspect is sort of out of my system. You know.
Mhm. Yeah, I look forward to seeing what's next for you for sure. And
Thank
in
you.
closing, you know, kind of fast forward years from now, looking back at your career as a whole, what would you say is your legacy? How do you want to be remembered?
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to be somebody who's remembered as leaving it better than I found it, as having made positive contributions inside and out of the ring. You know, if I can hopefully made positive impacts on the people that I worked with, and the people that I've trained. But you know, I think the thing to me that really means the most from a legacy standpoint is the respect of my peers, and the nice things that my peers say about me. I'm not good at taking compliments. They make me feel uncomfortable at times. But having said that, that doesn't mean that they don't make me feel good, and that it doesn't. You know, to be recognized by my peers and people I worked with, as somebody who they enjoyed working with, somebody who they felt I was reliable, safe to work with, and that we could have good matches. That's good enough for me, man. That's to have the respect of your peers in any field, is one of the greatest honors you can have in your life, and I think I have the respect of everybody who I step foot in the ring with, and that means a lot to me.
Well, Brian, thank you for your contributions in ring, and we look forward to seeing what you got behind the scenes to offer. And appreciate you taking the time to be here today.
Thanks, Joe. It's good to catch up, man. Good to see you, and all that good stuff, and hope to see you soon down the road.
Yeah, without a doubt. For the Kingpin, Brian Milonas, I'm Joseph Bruen. This has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe and leave your comments. Love to hear from you, the fans, what you thought of this episode and what you'd like to see on the next one. And we'll see you all